Good morning. Please take a seat. Fantastic. Sounds great. So I'm super excited to kick off our breakout session. My name is Elena Lihashkina, and I would love maybe to start from introductions of moderators for this room. So we have Kevin here. Kevin, can you just stand up to show the people? Okay. And also we have Anthony, and I believe Anthony is at the end, right? So three of us, Elena, Kevin, and Anthony, we're going to be in this room all the time for the next 3 days, right? So if you have any questions about track B, you would love to follow up, you would love to maybe you forgot the name of the person or forgot to ask your question, please stop by and we're going to be able to provide additional details. Okay, so I'm super, super excited to kick off this session because this session has my personal heart and my personal history with CDOIQ. So I came to CDOIQ community, which is really true community, about 6 years ago. And I came with really provocative topic to present that master data is dead, traditional master data is dead, and we have to do something about it, right? So we have a relative here, and we have Ansh, who is the SVP and Chief Product Officer for the company. And this company is really one of the companies who are challenging the status quo, who is really saying that, yes, traditional master data is dead. We like it or don't like it, because we have to manage it in a scale. We have to be able to integrate new innovative data sources. We need to do it in real time. And so this session with Ash being a leader in this product space industry is going to provide insights into how innovative solutions like Reltio is looking to resolve this question, right? So I was on the customer side of this type of platform, so I personally experienced like the benefits for big enterprises, but I'm also highly supporting this movement. Even from McKinsey's session in the morning, we heard about this product, right? And you can build the product facing your customer and creating business value, but you need all this infrastructure to be product itself, right? So AI plays a big role for this infrastructure to be agile, to be much quicker, more adaptable, and doing really different biggest configurations, right? So Ash, welcome. So we're going to have about 45 minutes presentation and 50 minutes for questions. You can ask in live who's in the room. If you're virtual, please put on the app. So we're going to take questions from app, and we're going to take questions from room. Welcome.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alina. I think I'm mic'd up. I'm good. Good morning, everybody. Ansh, Kanwar. That was a great introduction. It's always interesting to come back and talk at your alma mater because you feel like you haven't studied for the exam. And so by way of introduction, I have about 23 years of experience, all in the cloud space. And I spent early part of my career sort of racking and stacking servers and building out data centers when that used to be a core competency of how quickly you could set up your business in a new geography and so on and so forth, right? And of course, at this point and click, API call, you have a server, right? A sea change in that space. I worked for Citrix Systems. That's where I grew up. Spent about 15 years. GoToMeeting was one of my products. Spent a lot of time working through performance, and by performance, what I meant at that point was network performance, getting packets as quickly as possible from point A to point B. I worked for a while for LogMeIn, again, screen sharing and video-based customer support tools, remote access tools, and so on and so forth. I spent a couple of years at Onapsis working in the area of SAP security. And so when I look back, the packet routing problems were relatively easy. The security problems were a little bit harder, but still known solutions. And the common thread through my whole career has been data, as the single hardest problem to solve, and if you get it right, doors open to infinite scale. So my point of view for this talk will be obviously coming from the product point of view, as having sort of built these systems at scale over the past many years. A little bit about Reltio. I think Elena did a great job of introducing the company. But at Reltio, we brought MDM into a modern contemporary setting, right? Master data management in the cloud, driven as a multi-domain MDM, delivered real time, and applied to many of the use cases that you would never imagine applying sort of traditional MDM to. So I'll build a little bit of a picture of that. And where I want to get to in the next 40 minutes is really what is the edge of performance of the state of the art in MDM today, right? What is that edge? And then where AI, ML, more statistical techniques are really pushing that edge forward. So lay out a little bit of a roadmap with all of you, and I can tell you, come back next year and tell you how far we got sort of delivering on that roadmap and so on. And we'll keep about 20 minutes for discussion at the end, because I was fortunate enough to be part of the CDO sort of closed session yesterday, and I learned an enormous deal. So there's so much experience. Many people in the room, invented things around data. I shook hands with Don Vaney yesterday. Some of you might know he invented the 3 V's of data. I'm not washing this hand for 2 weeks, right? So I have a little bit of a fanboy thing going here. But it's really powerful to be amongst people who've invented this space and really are pushing it forward. So I want to start with a show of hands. This is going to be an interactive session. Get your shoulders limber, that sort of thing, yeah? So I want to ask, what's the zeitgeist, right? How do we feel about AI right now, at this point in time? Of course, AI is nothing new, right? We've been doing it in some form, fashion, variation ever since statistics, ever since linear regression was invented, which was, I don't know how many hundreds of years ago. And so at this point, though, it's burst upon the scene, wearing this label of GPT, right? And the tools are more accessible than ever. I think the keynote this morning was spot on. But as data professionals, especially if you're in the CDO seat or CDAO seat, give me the one word that comes to mind when you think about where we are right now with AI. Nascent.
Day zero.
Day zero. Confused.
Infants.
Yeah.
Rapid.
Infants, yeah. Rapid, very quickly. It's coming at you. Yeah, absolutely.
Excited and scared.
Well, you do, but okay. Excited and scared, right? And so, the reactions sort of vary from this notion of dread, right? It's the bad Terminator coming at you, and that's going to be the end of humanity, to irrational exuberance, where this is going to solve all problems. And obviously, as rational people, we understand neither of those two edges are true. There is some probability that each of those would happen, but let's look at the middle. And I think that's where we find ourselves as data professionals, really trying to rationalize all the hype and the doom. How do we incorporate these technologies to gain the advantages that are so obvious, and yet not fall into the pitfalls, right? So I think nascent is the right word, very early, especially when you talk about large language models. And that's also what I want to sort of distinguish as we talk through right now, bundling up AI, ML, and large language models in one big box. I think it does us a lot of disservice. So there are some parts that are nascent, but a lot of this technology very mature, and all of you in some form or another already have put it to work. Besides, I would never write off a technology. It can pretty much write its own marketing copy, like literally, right? So let me start with an anecdote. So dinner conversations, At my house, they're about AI. And a guest said, my sister just graduated. Guess what her graduation project was, what finals project was? What was it? Well, she's selling T-shirts. I'm like, hey, that sounds okay. Like, no, you don't know what she's doing. She's using large language models to summarize trending news from Twitter, from other sources, what's trending. She's using then generative models to create imagery that is relevant to that topic and text. She's in the loop where she approves the sort of art that is being generated. If she approves it, goes to an outsourced T-shirt marketplace, and she gets a cut out of it. Right? This is an undergraduate project, right? Done for fun and done over a couple of months. Right? So it's that view of like really at grassroots, large language models starting to take advantage of the Zuck versus Musk fight and converting that into actually economic potential. And that's like one little tiny thing. So imagine when we look at it from an industrial perspective, really zoom out. Anybody from McKinsey here? No. Well, so I just wanted to compliment McKinsey. They're putting out really good work in the public domain. And this economic impact of Gen AI, which is a report they updated from 2017, which was only about AI/ML, to include generative AI's impact. They've done a really good job of looking at 63 different use cases where generative AI will actually move the needle significantly. And they estimate $4.4 trillion potentially of added value just purely because of generative AI. Overall AI, I think, is in the 20-some trillion dollars. Anybody knows what the GDP is for the United States? 23 trillion. Anybody knows what GDP is for Germany? Fourth largest economy. It's around that mark. Right? So it's around the 4.3 trillion mark. So just generative AI in terms of impact will drive more than one of the top economies in the world today. Right? So just simply cannot ignore it. The other pieces I think that were really interesting for me is, we can clearly see impacts in the customer experience space, whether that is through chatbots, it is through easier to search help or other means of interaction. Process optimization, of course, advanced analytics, cybersecurity, both from an attacker and a protection point of view, that arms race will just escalate, right? And then productivity and collaboration in terms of scheduling as sort of the simplest case, and information sharing sort of translated automatically for all participants in sort of the more complex cases. But I think what was even more interesting is that they created a spread of where the impact is right now. Sales and marketing, content generation, for example, right? R&D, getting new code, especially test cases, and I believe R&D, sort of non-software R&D. Those were identified as the top areas of impact. So I definitely recommend reading that and using that as a rubric to figure out where your investments are at this point. To contrast with that, Workday also ran a survey of their customers, of their customer base, their CDOs in their scope. And they said, as a senior leader, do you think AI, you need AI to be competitive? And I don't know which 20% said no, right? But it's obvious in all sorts of broad surveys that AI is here to stay, right? But getting closer to the topic at hand, I wanted to pull one little nugget from that McKinsey study, and our keynote speaker from this morning alluded to this, right? Which is, how does this set of technologies apply to the data management space? The numbers up there are percentages of tasks or use cases in that space that are likely to be automated. I think the horizon is fairly long. I think it's a 10-plus year horizon. fully automated based on the the dark blue bar is AI ML sort of as we knew it before large language models, and the light blue bar is as we know it now, right? So whatever we know about data management is going to change, and it's going to change pretty dramatically from this point forward. So here's the other view. Here's a technical view. So if you think about what we just talked about, it is areas of impact within your business, right? Now let's look at what's actually happening under the cover. And I found Databricks, it sort of issued the State of Data and AI report. They issue it every year. And that had a very interesting graphic in it, which is this is about the number of notebooks that are using machine learning libraries that correspond to a particular area, right? So this can be a good proxy to look at actual investments that are going into different areas, different sort of algorithmic areas that are actually being applied, if you think of these as rows, applied to the columns that we already talked about, right? And you can think of like the ratio of investments. And not surprisingly, natural language processing is really, really well represented in the 2023 report. Simulations and optimizations being the second. All right, so that brings us to the essential dilemma that we face as data leaders. So we're working, and I had this conversation yesterday with a number of you. You're working as hard as possible to make your data environment into a glass box, right? Something that is transparent, it's verifiable. And here comes this technology that is essentially a new black box, right? But it has this label on it. It's going to accelerate not just the data environment, it's going to accelerate your company. Everybody else is going to be leveraging it. But it makes no pretense of being scrutable, right? It's an inscrutable black box. You have to take it at that value. But it will accelerate not just your outcomes, it'll also accelerate the feedback loops. And there is this sort of perverse incentive to pluck humans out of the loop and make that feedback loop go even faster. That is a very interesting recipe for going off the rails. And what is actually even more important for this room is you are all the people who are the adults in the room, right? You have the responsibility of figuring out what parts of this black box make sense for you to adopt and push and teach as you go through data fluency programs, right? How do you message the benefits of this versus sort of protect against the risks, right? So my contention is data management, data governance, data trust, however we want to talk about it, is the single most important area which will evolve to keep up with, or has to evolve, I should say, to keep up with and provide guardrails and facilitation around these black boxes. So this is at least the way I interpret and reflect back what I hear from our largest customers, right? You're all trying to drive these sort of business responsive data programs. Businesses change all the time. There's flexibility that you're building into your data programs, right? You are at a point where the most advanced frontier is where you can keep up with your business, right? And what you need from machine learning in general, and I generalize because I think LLMs are one specific data point here. You want your AI to be reproducible. If you ask it being the model, the same question twice, you want the same answer. You want some level of predictability. You want transparency. If the answer is different, you want to be able to understand why that answer is different. And this is quite amplified. This one aspect is very amplified in the master data management space because precision is very, very important. Precision is important. I'll give you an anecdote. So maybe a couple of years ago, we sort of migrated our sort of backend database capability from one technology to another technology. And we migrated millions upon millions upon millions of records. And we missed one record for a customer. And we got a support case for that, right? So it's, this crisis of reproducibility and transparency, it's much more amplified in a space where the whole purpose of your solution is to increase the trust in data and sort of the precision, yeah. Compliance. It was in the news this morning that the European Commission is considering very specific laws to govern AI and so on. So it's a very fast evolving space, but really, are you within your contractual limits when you're accessing your customers' data, for example, to train your model? That's a much more near-line question, whatever the laws sort of evolve into, right? And performance, right? Both the dollar performance, sort of the price performance, as well as latency and other characteristics of these models, you want it to be no worse than what it is today, at least in ratio to the benefits that these models are providing. Do these sort of characteristics resonate with the room? Yeah. Of course, Frank Slootman, second day of the Snowflake Summit this year, goes, to have an AI strategy, you gotta have your data strategy. Right? That's also clear as day to people in this room, right? Not a surprise, but I think the conversation from this point forward is really about those foundations, right? To create that revolution, tap into that revolution, what is the foundation that you need? And I'm gonna talk through sort of our approach at Reltio to build that strong foundation, but it really is in service of helping talk through what comes next, yeah? So in our view, that's what the world looks like. That's what all of your data looks like. It's fragmented, it's siloed, and I think MDM of all capabilities takes a very pragmatic view of that, right? We understand that silos exist for a reason. Either it's Conway's law applied to data, right? It's reflecting your organizational structure, or companies that have grown through acquisitions. There are reasons for this data fragmentation to exist. Data from Okta shows that an average enterprise has 454 different applications, SaaS applications, right? And so every time a new application comes into your environment, there's a little bit more fragmentation, right? So all sort of valid business reasons why we got to this picture, but the outcomes of that are very palpable for you as data professionals, right? Poor data quality. Even if it's fragmented, it can be high quality, but it's often not, right? And ultimately, this leads to friction in that business responsiveness that all of you're trying to drive. You've all seen some variation of this slide, or you've created this slide, right? Ultimately, all of that fragmentation leads to a trust gap. And that gap is the same whether you're talking about data as a foundation or building up on that and getting to more sophisticated models, right? And this was also in the latest Workday survey. The causes for that trust gap remain the same, whether you're talking about AI. It's poor quality data feeding into the models. It's shaky governance. So over time, the predictability of those models is in question, or the stability of those models is in question. And of course, skill set and talent. All right. So again, show of hands. So putting together some signals that, an easy Q&A that you can say yes or no to figure out if your data foundation is ready to build on top of or not. So let's do this exercise together. Raise your hand if your data strategy is fully centralized. Oh, wow, that's more than I thought. Raise your hands if your data strategy is fully distributed. Also less than I thought. And so I would assume everybody else is hybrid one way or another, yeah? Raise your hand if there's a very clear definition of very key dimensions, such as customer. Right? I am always shocked when I see the number of hands in response to that question. Right? These are difficult things because you're not solving a data problem, you're asking a business question. Right? Who is a customer at Where do we consider them in their life cycle? What is a system of record, and so on and so forth. Are the access rights to data clear and the access itself is governed? I want to talk to you guys. That's awesome. It's really great. No, I want to learn in that spirit, right? Data is cleansed and standardized in a way that allows for repeatable model building. That's great. Reference data is defined enterprise-wide. Like the easiest to standardize data, right, is defined enterprise-wide. Are your data sources cataloged from a metadata perspective, right? And your data through metadata fully discoverable? Critical ones are, right. Let's lower the bar. 50% of your data is discoverable through metadata. That's good, right? But again, just percentages. Look at the percentages, right? Both the dimension and fact data can be traced to systems of origin. That's great. And there was some discussion about lineage this morning, and I concur with that point of view. Event and fact data is uniformly time-stamped. Right? So this gets very critical as you're talking about model evolution, right? Are there established norms? Okay, I'm going to get on a soapbox here. Are there established norms around ethical use of data? That's fantastic. But here's the point, right? With machine learning, the feedback loops go so much faster. The fact that there are fewer or no humans in the loop, the models are biased, and we're not thinking about ethics. Not nearly at the level and scale that we need to. And so the touchstone there is, if you don't have an established set of norms, ethical norms around use of data, then that just amplifies when you train models based on that data, right? So my goal is not to beat up everybody. My goal is simply to share a set of frameworks. Like when I come to these talks, right, I want to take away something. I want to take away something that I can put into action. And hopefully these questions are simple enough, straightforward enough that you can use to sort of talk to your team about it and level up where you are. And if not, we're all going to be running AI programs, right? It's not whether you should or not. If your data is in a really bad state, am I saying that we need to put the brakes on, fix all of that, invest millions of dollars, and then only take up AI? That's not my point. My point is to be able to message the efficacy and effectiveness of your AI program, to bring about that revolution that's the promissory in all of this. I think you also need to be able to message why, what level of outcomes to expect given the state of the data. That'd be a good starting point. Does that resonate with everybody? Yeah. This is the part where I learned a lot yesterday. One of the pieces, Asha Saxena, 2-time successful entrepreneur, professor at Columbia, both business school and medical school. She wrote a book called The AI Factor, and she's doing book signings, by the way, later today. She lays out this data readiness framework, right? So you can look at the questions that I posed previously, or you can go get that book, and she lays out a very similar case, perhaps actually even a more broader case, for how to determine how ready you are for layering on AI models and sort of speedy feedback loops on top of your data foundation. So just a plug for that. And so as data management evolves, if you think of the bottom left as sort of your data governance or trust framework today, you're solving for catalog one way or another, or not, as we found out in the room, right? You're solving for access. Security, I think just after having data in a warehouse, you will have some sort of access management on top of that, and I think that's generally being solved. I think the question is how much of that data is public versus not. That's a furious debate right now. Data quality, starting from like your traditional notions of static data quality all the way to observability, lineage, semantics on top of that, connecting data to its meaning within the business, and then stewardship as a specific function, sort of that human in the loop, making sure that that there is oversight and accountability for the whole governance program. That's kind of the current view of the world, right? There is a mirror image of that, and I'm not talking products, right? The same product might provide you the solutions on the data trust side as they will on the model and model trust side. But there is an equivalent set of capabilities that you need to think about or are thinking about today. That as you step into AI and ML, that will become part of data management. Discovery, model discovery, right? Description of capabilities. We're talking about data as products today, models as products, and being able to discover them, describe them, interface with them. That's coming. Access for the models themselves, drift, bias, managing those, being able to explain the decisions that were made, being able to trace that back. Think of that as sort of the equivalence of lineage and semantics. And then model training, right? All of these capabilities as a mirror of your data governance capabilities, data management capabilities today, those are emerging, and you also need to plan for that as you sort of strike this balance between the revolution and having enough guardrails around it. And of course, from our point of view, regardless of, are you talking about sort of traditional pure data or are you talking about trained models, ultimately, you're talking about either your customers, in the B2B, B2B2C space, you're talking about locations, you're talking about products, you're talking about suppliers, and all of that is expressed as a domain at this point, right? That is, I think, the current state of the art. So making sure that those domains are effectively governed through either one of these sets of capabilities, that's going to be increasingly important. So let's step one step lower into master data management, into these domains. And our, obviously, a little self-serving view of the world, but we believe in it, is that there's really only one place in your data landscape where you're effectively increasing trust in that data and continuously increasing. The block exists so that you can increase trust in that data, and that's your modern MDM system, right? And if anybody's unfamiliar with master data management, really it's at the core of all of your entity data, bringing together your own first-party data, third-party data, making it available for consumption for either growth initiatives, efficiency initiatives, risk and compliance initiatives, a sort of very broad set of applicability, right? And so what the burden on these platforms, the core data platforms over time, will be not just to provide that data, but also that data to feed into these little blue boxes that I try to represent, sort of models that are running in each one of those, either applications that you've acquired or applications that you've built. But there is some software somewhere that's going to run a model that's going to consume that data, right? So the value of having that consistent cleansed data in your environment just goes up dramatically. I promise this is the only marketing slide in the deck. But really, I think it does convey Alina's point earlier, which is this is not your grandpa's MDM solution. We call it MDM, but really the way we think of it is a very operational system that sits at the heart of all of your entity data, whether it's connected to your CRM system, your warehousing system, your end users, your pumping data out to your analytics or data warehousing type of systems, two-way connections to everything, and unifying that data, match, merge, survivorship, which is kind of the traditional definition of mastering, but also enriching that data with third-party sources or otherwise, and then cleansing it and making it available again through an API to anybody who or any other system that wants to consume it downstream, right? That's our conception. That's what we built the company around. But in sort of to put a finer point on it, traditional MDMs, the ones that are dead, they really they really took this view. I mean, it's just a previous generation tech, right? So they took this view that master data management is an adjunct to your data warehouse. And therefore, if you want to improve the quality of data in your data warehouse, connect it up to an MDM system, right? Where our point of view is very different is that essentially what you're doing is protecting garbage from, or you're cleaning up garbage. So why don't you make it a system that protects against garbage in, garbage out? Move it to the left of your data warehouse or whatever consumption systems are downstream, and really connect it up to all of your operational systems, whether that's e-commerce or whatever operational OLTP systems you use. They're producing this data that, all of the noun data, that wouldn't it be great if it was in a single place where you could access it through any and all downstream systems readily available. And the connections to these systems were bidirectional, where you could keep that single source of truth, but go and sync all the upstream and downstream systems, right? That's kind of the view, and helps to sort of disambiguate sort of the traditional MDM from the modern MDM approach. So why am I telling you all of this? Well, we also do it at great scale, 8 billion plus consolidated profiles under management, et cetera. Point is that this is the state of the art, and we're able to do this in real time, right? This is the state of the art. Okay, great. So what are you telling us? Well, I'll walk you through a customer story that is really starting to now hit at the possible edges of this scale and how we're approaching it with AI/ML. Yeah. So this is a customer who's a company that's $35 billion in revenue annually. They've been in business for over 100 years, have business operations in 109 countries, and so on. They put in the master data management system for customer data, and they sync us with over 20 different ERP, CRM systems, et cetera. So essentially, that whole enterprise is represented as entities flowing through Reltio. And when they started out, they're very, very aware from a data strategy perspective, right? Incredibly, sort of the reinvention cycle that we saw this morning, they're really good at that. And they know that customer data is a strategic asset. They've wanted to fuel models for sales targeting. They've used this to save, I think, $500,000 a year just on shipping costs for large equipment. And for rapid resolution, sort of from a customer issue perspective, calls coming into the call center. So all good, right? This is the heart of an operational MDM system. So they're doing everything right. Here's the problem. When it comes to resolving matches, as in, is customer A the same as customer B? We can do a lot of automation where we can say, yes, absolutely, A and B are the same. And we can say with a lot of confidence, A and B are not the same. But there is this set in the middle that is ambiguous, right? And a large part of that ambiguity is resolved through data stewardship actions, i.e. manual actions, right? And for them, and I think this is probably the best benchmark in the industry, a data steward can resolve about 75 matches a day. 75 ambiguous matches a day. And they reported that at this point, as they've been increasing the volume of data coming in, the 3 Vs, right, that doesn't change, or 5 Vs now, I guess. As that has been going up, their ability, so they've been falling behind. And so their options are either they hire a number of data stewards, or we work together to innovate and find ways to reduce that set of ambiguous matches so there's less and less effort required. So that's our goal. That's our goal. Our goal is to go from that sort of 75 matches a day to 10x of that. This is keeping in mind that where they are right now is already a 10x improvement over where they were before they started on this journey, right? So by the time we're done, we want to have 100x efficacy, the first order of magnitude from just having an MDM, modern MDM system in place, but the next 10x attributable to all the automation that we can bring to bear. So we're working on sort of in this sequence. First and foremost, how much of that sort of ambiguous match manual capability can we offload to a model? of the ambiguous matches that are still remaining, how much of that can we resolve through a faster means of interaction? Could that be a conversational UI? Could that be a consultative UI? And for the very small percentage that really still needs to be manually resolved, could we decrease the time that is required to do research and reference to say, is A equal to B, right? So the reason I sort of put this up there is because to me, this is a durable advantage that we're building as an MDM company, this particular space, but it can also serve as a model for all of you to think about how you're going beyond using what's available out of the box and really building these capabilities that will stand the test of time in your products and in your enterprises. Yeah? And more's coming, right? So I think the march of AI and ML we just talked about augmented entity resolution sort of helping the human make decisions much faster. I think we're already seeing a lot of improvements in the ingestion of data, classification as data is coming in. As some discovery tools are starting to do this excessively well. So ask your catalog vendor if they're doing it. That's a superpower, because once you know that, you can connect it up all the way, and it's very viable that at some point you will not need any data modeling in a tool like MDM. If you know what's coming in, and you have some sort of capability, some sort of canonical capability to map those things together, why bother with a model, right? So that time to value for these data management solutions will go down even further. Quality and anomaly, I think enough has been said about it. I won't spend time on that. And governance, data change requests are a real thing, but they take time and they take process. So speeding up through those change requests and really landing the plane on that, that's going to see 10x improvements. Each one of these is a 10x improvement in this particular niche. All right, I also wanted to share a little bit about, you can think of us as a very niche data shop, and we're really solving one problem and trying to solve it really well. But in developing our MDM solution, we've been working with AI technologies now for many, many years. And so I wanted to just share a few lessons that we learned as an engineering organization going through that. So number one, we introduced our first feature, Match IQ, 3 years ago. We just released the next version of it. The difference is, when we started out, 3 years ago, we were all ginned up about training, right? You have a good model, and user actions will train those models. And we put it out there, and what we found that adoption was actually fairly low. With 2.0 now, we have pre-trained models that sort of make that starting point so much easier for any domain owner to absorb. So you get this lift out of the model right out of the gate. And so that leads to then some need for training to adapt the model to your specific data, but really 80% of the work is already done, right? Number two, we needed only about 15% of the time for model building. The rest of it, as is well known in this room, was moving data around, getting into the right shape, uglifying it. I don't know if that's a technical term or not, but we use it to disaggregate data and get it ready for these models, going backwards from events into training data. And we got the biggest gains from automating that sort of data acquisition and uglification process so that we could put our training loop in a very fast, sort of tight loop. And then finally, large language models. I think they're a very powerful tool. They're nascent for use cases like this. Right now, the training cost and inference cost are almost the same, which is, you want them to be very asymmetrical before you put them into some sort of massive commercial use. They're really good for other use cases, but for these particular use cases, I think it's a little bit early for large language models. All right, that's been our learnings. So let's start to come back up in terms of leveling and sort of generalize this to what we hear from our customers today. So where they see sort of complexity of these systems and this sprawl as a barrier, they're continuing to invest in semantics and sort of like connecting back whether it's glossaries or ontologies, sort of connecting back data to your business meaning. And looking at MDM as one of the big pieces that helps lift the quality of that data. Where they see sort of manual quality challenges, they're adopting data observability. I don't know if Telma is in the room. Monica is in the back. I think they're doing some really great job. They're doing a great job with data observability. And data stored workloads, and we talked about that at length, right? Those are areas to look at. And then most importantly, from my point of view, starting to establish these AI governance models. We have AI trust, that's fine, right? Governance, a certain meaning associated with it. But this really is about accountability and sort of layering that on top of your current trust programs. And then getting the technology in place to be able to get that accountability and data traceability, which will come, that ask will come, right? So that's the bulk of my spiel. I'd like to close out just by sort of summarizing it. If you forget about the rest of it, sort of remember these three things that I want to share with you. First is it's here, right? AI is here. With generative AI, it's crossed that threshold where we're, for heaven's sake, talking about it at dinner, and AI is involved in making T-shirts. It's here, right? You may be an LLM skeptic, but you can't be an AI skeptic at this point, right? So as you think about it, as you manage that risk, the underlying data to us, from our point of view, is the biggest single risk that will derail this program over time. And the most important thing is really understanding that level of risk and then incorporating that into your AI/ML program. Making AI management a part of your data strategy or your data management strategy, right? We talked about sort of the reflected set of tools that you will need to be able to apply the same kind of rigor that you apply to sort of the underlying data. So investing in those systems. And the third is, this speaks to the simplicity and availability of these capabilities now. Start for real. Do not just experiments that sort of tell you whether it works or not. Put some things out there. Get user feedback. Start small. Start with a slice, which things like customer success, better interfaces through chatbots. That's an obvious area to start. Educate your teams around prompt engineering. It's a thing that's here to stay. And so I just like to close by saying that I'm very, very excited. I'm not irrationally exuberant, but I'm very, very excited by what's been wrought so far. And I'm really looking forward to more of these conversations, A, to understand more where all of you are going, and B, to learn about the challenges that you no doubt see much better than I do. All right. I think we can move to questions. We have maybe 12 minutes or so for questions, and I don't pretend to be the expert at everything, and I would love for others to sort of chime in and have a discussion.
Excellent. Thank you, Ansh. Okay, so we have a few questions that came in through remote listeners, but why don't we start with folks in the room, and we can bring a microphone to you.
Hi. So I'm interested in the slide that you had on moving MDM into operational.
Right.
I'm wondering if you have any information about sort of what the benefit is of moving the information into that, moving the MDM system into that operational model,
Yeah.
and having MDM kind of push the data back into the operational systems versus the actual matching part of the MDM system. Like, do you have those metrics or value chain?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you don't think about mastering data overall, but think about the first step in that process, which is entity resolution, right? What entity resolution does is it will tell you if you've seen this entity before or not. So it gives you this ability to search before you create a record. And therefore, you can create a unique ID for a customer whether either you can create a new ID for a customer you haven't seen before, or you can sort of return the ID that already existed, right? So if you just think about that capability of ID generation or unique customer recognition, you need that in every single flow that is about customer signups, right? And so a lot of our financial services customers, that's where they put us in the operational sense, right next to their sign-up systems, where being able to recognize a customer is the first step in KYC or any of these other sort of fraud detection related capabilities that they build on top of what we bring, right? So like one use case, very small, then you sort of expand out from there, and you think about a flow where a customer has made a purchase and that you're trying to ship that from your warehouse, right? How integrated are your e-commerce system and your warehousing system? And wouldn't it be great if, as soon as the order is created, the customer is referenced from some system of record, and as they're shipping out, they're also able to reference back to that customer. I mean, these use cases, I think we're all solving them one way or another. But within an MDM system, it just guarantees certain kinds of consistency, and that's what's being put to use more and more in the operational context.
I got a question here and then there.
Hi, very nice presentation. I'm stuck with this slide that you have, that correlation between the data management and then the model building, governance, and all of that. How do you actually, I was actually anxiously looking, how do you do that correlation? I mean, you cannot wait for the data management to all complete and then build your AI models, right? Like what you said.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do you, make them hand in hand? I mean, are there some kind of a roadway to look, hey, these attributes of data management could be correlated with AI aspects?
Yeah, I mean, I could give you, again, a very simple example, right? You could think of the ID generation piece that we were talking about. You're going to train your models not just on who, but the what. So you're going to train them on certain customers bought a red blazer on Tuesday in Massachusetts, right? I would like to understand of that set the propensity of a subset of them to buy a blue blazer tomorrow, right? Whatever is your complicated use case, right? And so wouldn't it be great to understand that your model is trained on a certain set of representative interactions or users in the past? And wouldn't it be great to be able to correlate back what the model was trained on? And that essentially comes down to having a list of IDs that, from an entity point of view, that were used to train that model. And therefore now you can, when you're doing a regression between model A and model B, you can say if one of the differences was the underlying data that we trained on was materially different between A and B, right? So that's one example, but you can sort of, lineage is another big piece, right? Which then does the same thing, but over time. And just to be clear, right, that is sort of a overlying sort of this data management umbrella. So there is no one tool that'll do that all for you, right? And this is more directionally where I think data management needs to head, where that correlation is not, again, another human being trying to connect all the pieces together, but it's like obvious when you're sort of doing this model management. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Sure. Right. Sylvester, I think you may need a microphone just so folks can hear.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on the ambiguous matching piece, because similar as a follow-on to that question, there's a human element to resolving those matches, right?
Absolutely.
AI can tell you the what, but not the how per se.
Absolutely.
So marrying the data management to the AI production line, if you will, what's your take on your solution's ability to inform the business decision around what is the golden record?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the word golden record, but sort of this trusted record that sort of aggregated over time. I think we're talking about human augmentation, right? We're definitely not talking about taking the human out of the loop. I mean, consider the scenario. One of our customers makes CAT scan and MRI machines. And their biggest fear is that they will ship an MRI machine, it'll show up at the wrong address, right? So for high-value transactions, we want to make sure that humans are in the loop and they're validating those decisions. Now, humans don't get everything right at all times. That's what introduces bias in these models. But still, I think models don't take accountability, humans do. And so we are definitely very much on the augmentation side of the argument and creating efficiencies through that.
Yeah, because you have to build trust in the business.
100%.
You know what I mean? That,
Absolutely.
You make
Absolutely.
a recommendation based
Right.
on some AI model. Then
Right.
The minute that doesn't work out here,
100%.
credibility is gone.
100%. And that sort of degrades trust in something that could be so powerful in the future.
Great presentation, thank you. So on one of the slides, you had customer feedback.
Yeah.
And one of the top takeaways was the biggest barrier to implementing AI is siloed, or not siloed, but what was it, the explosion of data or
Sure.
siloed data?
Yeah.
And you said this solution for that is invest in MDM, invest in semantics to deal with the interoperability challenge. So
Yeah.
can you share some experiences from Reltio or from
Yeah.
what you're doing with customers about how they're trying to solve for that interoperability issue through semantics?
I know. I think that's a great question. I think so. In the customer context, I think a lot of the benefits of these large language models, they can come from unstructured data. I'll give you the Reltio example. Being a smallish company that we are, we still have 6 different. We have community, we have our docs portal, we have our technical documentation, sort of API documentation, and we have our support site. And so there's already, just in terms of how we arm our customers with information that they need timely, that's fragmentation, right? So that's fragmentation in unstructured data. Typically, that's not an MDM problem, right? That's much more of being able to, and the large language models are great at sort of contextually absorbing that, converting that into an NLP problem, and then presenting answers there, right? So that's sort of the first half of your question. I think the second half is an MDM system will answer the who, right? It will answer, if you use Reltio just as a plug, we will absorb transactions and events, so we can sort of push that boundary of what MDM did, not just from a noun perspective, but also from a verb perspective, put those two together and sort of help you build models. But it's still the why piece is missing, right? So having an ontology or some sort of sequencing that says why this process is the way it is, and why the inputs and outputs to the MDM are happening the way they're happening, that can enable a lot of sort of, that's essentially the digital twin we were talking about. And one of the examples is that you can detect fraud much more easily if you have those 3 things together, right? Absent any one of those 3, you can't answer that question. Is there fraud or not?
Excellent. We have 2 more questions, and I think at least 2 more minutes, and at least 3 more questions. Is that right?
I can take it offline.
Okay.
Yeah, because mine is a little long, so I'll take it
That sounds
offline.
great.
Okay.
I'll also mention that Reltio has a table here, or
Yeah.
a booth here, correct?
That's
So
right,
folks
that's
can
right.
also stop by and speak with entrepreneurs.
We're booth number 21.
Booth number 21, there we go. Why don't we try to do one more question? There we are.
I have one question related to the traditional way of managing data and master data with rules. So how
Yep.
do you see rules working together with AI?
That is exactly what we're working on right now. One of the bubbles was augmented entity resolution. That's exactly what we're solving right now. Our goal is to augment the rules themselves, learning from as your data stewards are taking actions, to then create an intelligent rule, if you will, for lack of a better word, that really sort of over time reduces the number of decisions that your data steward has to make. At the same time, as I shared with you, precision in data management is very, very important. So we don't see rules as sort of this overarching piece going away to give you the kind of control that you need to make sure the CT scan machine goes where it needs to go. So it'll be a balance between those two. And I think that also reflects kind of the augmentation conversation we were having, where that this balance between precision and ease of use, that will change over time, but rules are not going away from our point of view.
Fantastic. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Ansh. Great stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate everybody being here.